So here we are, step 6 on our 7 steps to becoming more mental health aware journey. Step 6 is an interesting one because it very much relies on mastery or practice of steps 1 to 5 in order to be able to really support people, because step 6 is all about exploring and not solving. When it comes to supporting other people or helping other people, we do very often go to a space of problem solving, and we've talked about that in previous videos, so I'm not going to labour that point too much. It is really key that we kind of keep a little bit of that in check. I mean, the reason why we do this actually, because again, it comes from the best of intentions. We go to a space of problem solving because we want to help people, and because if it's somebody that we care about, we would like them to move quite quickly into a better space. So we go to the kind of problem solving side of things to try and move people. And as we talked about on step 4 on Thursday, that's taking it at our pace and not at their pace. That's almost forcing it rather than offering it. So we need to, this is why all the previous steps really come into play here when we get to this exploration bit. And it is very much about keeping our stuff separate. So again, we can often go to a space of problem solving because maybe we've been through something similar and we know what worked for us. Maybe it's because actually it's really hard for us to see someone that we care about struggling, so we want to move them through quickly, so we kind of, our pace becomes the thing that drives it, and also we solution find and problem solve to try and move things quicker. The other thing that we can do there as well is we can get frustrated when people don't take our advice. We become quite invested in what we think is the right way forward, and we become quite invested in what we think the solutions are. And when someone doesn't either try those things or resists those things, we can take it personally. And this is why step 5, what we looked at yesterday, is really important. Keeping our own stuff in check and keeping ourselves separate from the experience. Because we might well have gone through something similar, but we're having a different experience, or we had a different experience to the way somebody else is having an experience now. This is why exploration is really, really key. The other thing that is really important about exploration is that it encourages people to come up with their own solutions and get a bit creative with us alongside them, helping them along the way. Don't worry too much about what the outcome is. You might have some ideas in your mind of what the solutions could be, or what some potential things to try could be. But rather than suggesting those solutions or telling somebody to try those things, it might be about opening up that conversation and saying, what do you think might be helpful at this time? You know, what would bring you some joy? What would need to change to make you feel a bit better at this point? Lots of really nice open questions. Your open questions are your what, your who, your why, your when, your how. All those kind of questions that don't prompt a yes or no answer. We can very much go to that space of, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And actually what that can sometimes get is, you know, well, have you tried this? No. Well, why not? Don't want to. We're almost backing ourselves into a bit of a corner really with the questions that we ask, keeping those questions nice and open. What other things have you considered? How are you feeling today? You know, is that different to how you were feeling yesterday? How is it different to how you were feeling yesterday? It's really opening up that conversation and that exploration and using those open questions to do that. The great thing about that is that you will get more information. So going back to step 2, seeking to understand, that doesn't stop after an initial conversation. If you're supporting someone on their journey, that seeking to understand needs to be constant. So constantly asking them how they're feeling today, what's going on, how does it differ? It's keeping yourself abreast, because anyone who's struggled with their mental health, you know, I speak from personal experience, from 1 hour to the next, sometimes you can feel differently. So when you sought to understand how I was doing a week ago, I might feel very different to that right now. So it is a constant process, and that exploration, not only does that encourage a bit of creative problem solving or creative solution finding from the other person, it also keeps you up to date on how they're doing. It keeps you in, it keeps you seeking to understand. And it also means that we release any outcome expectations. And again, that is the hardest thing. If you're an employer, for example, that's supporting somebody through mental health challenges at work, if you're a leader, you know, there might be a bit of an agenda there that I need this person to get better soon because I need them to be contributing and getting on with things. That is understandable, it is, but that's your agenda then, and that's your pace, your time scale. And when that starts to creep in, it will potentially impact the level of support that you give that person, because actually your agendas become important rather than theirs. The same thing applies if you're supporting a friend or colleague or a loved one. You know, just think about, have you got an agenda here? Do you need this person to get better or feel better? You know, because then it does become about your agenda, and that's where we do need to tread carefully. I mean, I hope you can start to see now why all of these steps are so important, and why the steps are the order of the steps is important as well. You can't get to that space of exploration until you have really conveyed empathy and sought to understand the initial situation, because the likelihood is there won't be a level of trust there that makes that person feel safe to explore, if you like. You can't do that exploration without being aware of what your agenda might be or what your requirements might be, and then putting them to one side where we want someone to move forward, or we want someone to fix something, or we want someone to try something. It's all of a sudden not about them, it's about us, and it's about our agenda. All of these steps, you know, they fall into place, and it is about doing sort of all 7 of them that we'll get to at the end. So yeah, just really consider that exploration. And you know what's nice about that is you take the pressure off yourself. Sometimes it can feel like when you're supporting somebody, whether you're a leader or a parent or a spouse or whatever, you know, that you've got to fix it. It's your, you know, I've got to sort this out for this person, I've got to fix this for this person. And you can take a bit of that pressure off, actually, because the only thing that you've got to do in that space is support that person and be alongside that person, not pushing or pulling that person, being with them. And that's where the exploration bit, it's a great indicator that you are alongside that person, because you are asking questions, you are getting them to consider some creative solutions. You're asking them what might work for them, because that's the other thing as well. You may well have tried something when you were in that situation that really worked for you. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for them. And what happens when we suggest things that don't work for a person, even with the best of intentions, what it can say to the subconscious is, you don't understand me. You wouldn't suggest that if you did, if you got where I was right now. So the exploration is also a really safe way of coming up with solutions, because the solution finding and the problem solving is driven by the person you're supporting rather than by you. And that's something that therapists and counsellors, particularly non-directive therapists and counsellors, it's a rule that they live by. They're not there to fix a person. They're there to support a person through their journey of self-discovery. They're there to reflect things back to a person. And what I like about some of those techniques and tools that therapists and counsellors use is that they're quite accessible, and they're things that if we all did with everybody every day, we'd have a much calmer society, a much more empathic and understanding society. So whilst I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we all go out and become therapists, or we try and be armchair therapists, these tips that I'm giving you in these videos are absolutely accessible. They're not things that you have to be a therapist to employ. They're things that you can employ every day with everybody that you speak to. It's hard, don't get me wrong. You know, it has to be quite conscious, but it is something that we can do. So let's summarise. Step 1, tuning into those behavioural changes and using them as an indicator that something might not be right, and learning to appreciate those behavioural changes rather than judge them. Step 2, seeking to understand from a space of non-judgmental curiosity, putting aside our own agendas and really wanting to figure out or find out what's going on for that particular person. Step 3, using reflective language, offering back and reflecting back what we hear as a way of conveying that we have understood, and also starting to help a person maybe develop some discrepancy in their own voice and their own thoughts. Step 4, very much about offering and not forcing people, so being that support, making suggestions, but remembering that it's not about our time frame, it's not about how quickly we need a person to move through this, it's applying a bit of patience. Step 5, keeping our own stuff in check, so knowing that this is my experience or was my experience, but this is somebody else's experience, and the two have to be separate, and keeping my own emotion in check if I'm supporting somebody who's struggling with things. And then today, that exploration, that really open, conversational, open questions, really finding out what people think is going to work for them, and getting them to do a bit of the thinking around some of the creative problem solving, and being the person that's alongside them as they go through that. So we have one step left, which is a culmination really of everything that we've looked at over this week. And then of course there's the bonus video on Monday around mental health first aid. So yes, I hope you've enjoyed this clip. I will see you tomorrow.